James had always lived a simple life. He was just an ordinary guy, working a regular job in a small office. Most of his days were spent in front of a computer, typing away at numbers and emails, doing what he needed to get by. But something was missing. He felt like his life lacked excitement, something extraordinary to look forward to. He'd heard of people doing amazing things, people who chased their passions or followed their dreams, but it never seemed like that was for him. One evening, James was invited to a friend's gathering at a cozy cafe. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small group of people, chatting, laughing, and enjoying a few drinks. James wasn't even sure why he was going. It wasn't his usual scene. But something about it felt different. The people were warm, the atmosphere easygoing, and for once, he felt like maybe he could let go of the stress that usually weighed him down at the party. He met her, Olivia. She was confident, radiant, and her laugh filled the room like music. James couldn't help but notice how she stood out from the crowd. While most of the others seemed caught up in their usual conversations, Olivia had a presence, as if she carried a little mystery with her. They started talking. At first, it was just small talk, nothing serious, just a casual exchange. But soon, James found himself drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. She had this playful energy about her, and the way she spoke made everything feel light. She shared that she loved music, and James, trying to keep the conversation going, mentioned that he didn't know much about it. "Oh, you don't know much about music? Well, I guess that's okay," Olivia said with a teasing smile. "But I'll make you a deal." James raised an eyebrow. "A deal? What kind of deal?" Olivia leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a playful whisper. "If you can play me a beautiful piece on the piano, I'll marry you." James couldn't help but laugh. Was she joking? He had never even thought about playing the piano, let alone doing it well enough to impress someone. He tried to laugh it off. "Well, that's a pretty high bar, don't you think?" "I don't even know the first thing about playing the piano," Olivia winked. "You don't have to know now. But if you ever learn and impress me, then we'll see. It's a simple challenge. It was meant to be a joke, right?" He figured she was just playing around and it wasn't something to take seriously. But there was something in the way she said it, the spark in her eyes. It almost felt like she was daring him. James smiled, not knowing how to respond. "All right, I'll take your challenge. But don't hold your breath," Olivia laughed, clearly enjoying herself. "I won't, but I'll be waiting." The rest of the night went by quickly. James found himself thinking about Olivia more than he expected. She was different from anyone he'd met before. It wasn't just her beauty or her confidence, but something about the way she made everything seem so effortless. She made him feel like he could do anything, like maybe his simple life didn't have to stay that way forever. After that night, James couldn't shake the idea of learning how to play the piano. He found himself Googling how to play the piano when he got home. It was laughable, really. He couldn't even read music, and the idea of sitting in front of a piano, fingers awkwardly tapping the keys, seemed like a joke. But then, as the days went by, James started to think about it more seriously. Olivia had made it sound so simple. Learn to play the piano, impress me, and maybe you'll marry me. At first, he thought it was just a silly game, something she had said without thinking. But the more he thought about it, the more he felt this pull to prove something not to Olivia, but to himself. Could he actually do it? His friends laughed when he mentioned it. "You play the piano?" they joked. "You don't even know where middle C is." James chuckled with them, but inside, something was changing. There was a part of him that wanted to show he could take on a challenge, no matter how difficult. He wasn't the type to just give up without trying. So, despite the laughter, he signed up for lessons. The first few lessons were a blur. The instructor, a friendly woman named Mrs. Jenkins, patiently guided him through the basics, learning to read music, understanding rhythm, and, most importantly, finding the right keys. James felt like a complete beginner. Every note seemed impossible. His fingers stumbled over the keys, his mind racing to keep up. It was frustrating, and at times he wondered if he was wasting his time. But then he thought about Olivia's smile when she issued the challenge. He couldn't quit now. Weeks passed, and little by little, James made progress. He could read some basic music now, and he was learning how to play simple tunes. Every time he managed to play even a few notes correctly, a small sense of pride bubbled up inside him. It wasn't much, but it was a start. One weekend, a local music competition was held in the city, and James, feeling both curious and nervous, decided to attend. He'd never been to something like this before, but it was a chance to see real pianists at work. As he sat in the audience, listening to the performers, something unexpected happened. One of the pianists played a piece that took his breath away. It was smooth, beautiful, and completely mesmerizing. The way the pianist's fingers danced across the keys, the emotions that flowed from the music kit, was like nothing he had ever heard before. James sat there, mesmerized by the performance. He could barely believe how incredible it sounded. In that moment, he realized just how far he had to go. His dreams of impressing Olivia suddenly felt distant. He wasn't anywhere near the level of the professionals. But instead of feeling discouraged, James felt something shift within him. This was the kind of music he wanted to make, not just for Olivia, but for himself. As the competition ended, James walked out of the hall with a sense of determination. He would continue practicing, even if it meant struggling through more difficult pieces. Even if he never became a professional pianist. The challenge Olivia had set before him wasn't just about impressing her anymore. It had become a personal journey. A way for him to grow, to prove to himself that he could rise above his own limitations. The next time he saw Olivia, he felt different. He wasn't sure if he was any closer to impressing her with his piano skills, but he felt proud of how far he'd come. He wasn't just the guy from the office anymore. He was someone who was willing to face a challenge head-on, no matter how difficult it was, and in a way that made all the difference. James was starting to get a sense of how big of a challenge he had taken on. It wasn't just about sitting at a piano and playing a few notes. The more he learned, the more he realized how complex and beautiful the instrument really was. At first it was frustrating. The keys seemed like they were too far apart, and he had trouble remembering which finger went where. He would practice the same scale over and over again, making tiny mistakes that felt huge. Every wrong note seemed to echo louder in his head, but there was something about this challenge that kept him going. It wasn't just the thought of impressing Olivia anymore. It was the idea of pushing himself, of doing something he never thought he could. He was learning to play the piano, and that, in itself, was a small victory. The more he practiced, the more he felt like he was unlocking something inside of himself, hidden desire to become better, to prove that he could stick with something. No matter how hard it was, Olivia had been on his mind a lot. He hadn't seen her much after that first meeting at the cafe. She was busy with her own life, and he was buried in piano practice. But there were moments when he thought about her challenge. It wasn't just a playful bet anymore. It felt like it had become a part of his journey. He wanted to make her proud, not just with the music, but with his growth as a person. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he wasn't about to back down. One afternoon, as James was finishing up a long practice session, he received a message from Olivia. It had been weeks since their last conversation, and he was surprised to hear from her. The message was simple. "Hey, how's the piano coming along? Still planning to impress me?" James chuckled as he read the text. He hadn't expected her to reach out, but her words were like a spark, reigniting his drive. He quickly typed back, "It's coming along. Slowly, but surely. You won't be disappointed." Olivia's response came almost instantly. "I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I'll even help you out one day, give you some tips. But you have to promise me you won't give up." The message made James smile. It was kind of her to offer, but he didn't want to rely on her help just yet. He was determined to figure it out on his own. But at the same time, it felt good knowing that she was watching, that she hadn't forgotten about their little challenge. Days turned into weeks, and James kept up with his lessons. He made steady progress, learning to play more complicated pieces. Every time he learned a new song, there was a sense of accomplishment, but there was still so much more to go. The scales, the rhythm, the technique, it was all starting to make sense. But the road ahead felt long. One afternoon, as James was practicing a new song, something unexpected happened. He had been working on it for days, but it wasn't coming together the way he wanted. His fingers felt stiff, and the music sounded flat. He was on the verge of giving up when his phone buzzed. It was Olivia. "Hey, are you free? I'm at the park nearby. I was thinking of bringing over a few songs for you to try. What do you think?" James hesitated for a moment. He wasn't ready for her to hear him play, not yet. But there was something in her message that made him want to take the leap. Maybe it was the fact that she believed in him. Maybe it was the fact that she had been so patient, even when he hadn't made much progress. He decided to push past his nerves. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, he typed back. James didn't know what he expected when he showed up at the park, but this wasn't it. Olivia had this way of making him feel both nervous and excited at the same time. When he sat down on the bench beside her, she handed him the music sheets she had brought, a little smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You're not going to chicken out now, are you?" she teased, glancing at him with a playful glint in her eyes. James laughed awkwardly, glancing at the sheet music. "I guess we'll find out, won't we?" There was no turning back now. Olivia was here, sitting beside him, waiting to hear him play. He felt the weight of the moment settling in. It was one thing to practice alone in his apartment, surrounded by silence except for the sound of the keys. But playing in front of someone else, especially someone like Olivia, was a whole different level of pressure. Still, he tried to shake off the anxiety and focused on the music. He took a deep breath and placed his fingers on the keys. The first few notes were shaky. His fingers felt stiff, and his mind raced as he tried to remember the next part of the song. He could feel Olivia's eyes on him, waiting, but he didn't dare look up. All he could think about was the music and the fact that he was still so far from perfect. The more he played, the more he realized how much harder this was than he ever thought it would be. It wasn't long before his fingers missed a note, then another. He tried to fix it, but the music started to sound like a mess. His heart sank. He could feel his confidence slipping away, piece by piece. Olivia, however, didn't seem to mind. She sat quietly, watching him play, never interrupting. When he finished the first section of the piece, she clapped lightly, not in a mocking way, but with genuine encouragement. "That was really good." "Actually," she said, smiling at him. James looked at her in surprise. "Really? It sounded terrible to me." "No, it didn't," Olivia insisted. "You're learning. You're getting there. It's not about being perfect right away. It's about getting better each time. That's what matters." Her words didn't make the pressure go away, but they did help. James felt a little lighter, a little more confident. Maybe he hadn't nailed the song, but he was getting closer. Slowly, bit by bit. The challenge was tough, but he wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything he had put into this. Olivia seemed to understand his frustration. "How about we take a break and I show you a few things?" "I think you're just overthinking it." He didn't want to admit it, but he was relieved. "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." They moved to a nearby table, where Olivia pulled out a notebook from her bag. She started explaining a few techniques to him, breaking them down in simple terms. Her approach was gentle but firm, like she genuinely cared about helping him. She showed him how to relax his hands, how to position his fingers properly, and even gave him tips on how to read the music faster. James was amazed at how much he didn't know. He had spent so many hours practicing, but it was like he'd been doing it all wrong. Olivia patiently worked through each mistake, guiding him step by step. By the time they took a break for a drink, James felt like he was starting to understand the music in a way he hadn't before. The notes weren't just symbols on a page anymore. They were emotions. Each note had a purpose, a story. For the first time since he'd started learning, James felt a glimmer of excitement. He wasn't just struggling to hit the right keys anymore. He was beginning to understand the language of the piano. "So what's next?" Olivia asked, her smile warm and encouraging. James picked up the sheet music again, more confidently this time. He went through the song once more, this time remembering a little more of what Olivia had taught him. It still wasn't perfect, but it was better. He could feel the difference. He played through the piece without too many mistakes, his fingers moving more fluidly across the keys. When he finished, he glanced at Olivia, unsure of what to expect. She was still watching him closely, her expression thoughtful. After a moment of silence, she spoke. You're definitely getting better. I'm impressed. James felt a wave of relief wash over him. Really? Olivia nodded. Yeah, you've come a long way. I know it hasn't been easy, but you're putting in the work, and that's what counts. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Just focus on the process, and you'll keep improving. Her words meant more to him than he could express. He had spent so much time worrying about whether he could impress her, but now he realized that wasn't the point. It wasn't about playing a flawless piece of music. It was about the effort, the willingness to learn and grow. After a while, they stood up, ready to leave the park. As they walked together, James couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He still wasn't anywhere near as good as he wanted to be, but he had come so far from where he started. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could make it. As they said their goodbyes, Olivia turned to him with a smile. You'll be ready soon, I'm sure of it. Just keep at it. James nodded, feeling a newfound sense of determination. I will. I won't give up. Walking away, he felt different, more confident, more focused. It wasn't just the piano that had changed. Something inside of him had shifted. He was learning to embrace challenges, to keep going even when things felt hard. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real lesson all along. Weeks went by and James felt like he was living in two worlds. One world was the daily grind, his regular job, the usual routine, and the quiet life he had always known. The other world was the piano, where he spent hours each day practicing, making mistakes, and learning something new. At times, he found himself so absorbed in the music that he lost track of time. He no longer saw the piano as just a challenge to impress Olivia. It had become something much more personal, a way for him to grow, to push himself beyond what he thought he could do. His progress was slow, but it was steady. There were days when he felt like he had hit a wall, when the notes just wouldn't come together. He'd sit at the piano, fingers hovering above the keys, frustrated that he couldn't play the way he wanted to. But then there were other days, moments when everything clicked, and the music flowed like a river. Effortless and smooth, James had learned to embrace both the struggles and the small victories. Every time he made progress, no matter how small, it felt like a win. And as he practiced, he realized that he was becoming more patient with himself, more understanding of the process. He didn't need to be perfect right away. He just needed to keep going. One evening, as he was practicing at home, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Olivia. She had been quiet for a while, but now she was reaching out again. Hey, I heard there's a local concert this weekend. I know you've been working hard. What do you think about performing there? Just a small performance. No pressure. James stared at the message for a moment, his heart racing. The idea of performing in front of an audience was terrifying. He hadn't played for anyone other than Olivia, and even then, he had been nervous. He wasn't ready for something like this. Or was he? He thought about it for a while. The thought of performing in front of an audience made his palms sweat, but at the same time, it felt like the next step, the challenge he needed to take to move forward. If he could perform at the concert, it would be proof to himself that he had come a long way, that he was no longer the person who had never touched a piano before. With a deep breath, he typed back, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll perform." The decision felt both terrifying and liberating. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he had come so far. The performance wasn't just about playing for Olivia anymore. It was about proving to himself that he could face his fears and push through them. The days leading up to the concert were filled with practice. James worked on the piece he planned to perform, obsessing over every note, every transition. He spent hours at the piano replaying the same passages over and over again until they felt just right. There were moments when he felt like giving up, when the pressure seemed too much, but he kept reminding himself of the reason he was doing this, to show himself that he could face challenges and grow stronger from them. On the day of the concert, James woke up early, his stomach a mix of excitement and nerves. He hadn't told anyone about his performance. This was something he wanted to keep to himself, a private moment of growth. He spent the entire morning going over his piece one last time, making sure he knew it inside and out. But no matter how much he practiced, there was still a part of him that was uncertain. When he arrived at the concert hall, it was buzzing with activity. People were chatting, getting ready, and a few performers were already warming up. James felt a little out of place. This was the real deal, not a casual gathering with friends. He had been to concerts before, but being on the other side of it was a whole new experience. His heart raced as he took in the crowd, the bright lights, and the polished atmosphere of the venue. He found a quiet corner to practice one last time, his fingers trembling as they brushed over the keys. Every note felt heavy, like it carried the weight of all his fears and doubts. But then he thought about the journey that had brought him here. He wasn't the same person who had first sat down at the piano, unsure of where to begin. He had learned. He had grown. And no matter what happened today, that would always be true. The time to perform was approaching. James felt his nerves spike again, but he reminded himself to breathe. He wasn't doing this for anyone else. He was doing it for himself. When the announcer called his name, James stood up, his legs feeling like they might give out. He walked to the stage, his mind racing with thoughts of failure, of messing up in front of everyone. But as he sat down at the piano, something shifted. The nerves didn't disappear, but they became something else. It was as if the music itself was calling to him, urging him to let go and just play. He placed his fingers on the keys, took a deep breath, and began. The first few notes were shaky. But then, something incredible happened. The music began to flow. His fingers moved with confidence, the piece coming together in a way that surprised even him. Each note carried the emotions he had poured into his practice, the frustration, the doubt, the determination, and now, it felt like the music was speaking for him. He looked up at the audience for the first time and saw that they were listening, waiting. There were no distractions, no thoughts of failure. It was just him and the music. And in that moment, James realized something important. The music wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about expressing himself, about showing his growth and his willingness to face something difficult. By the time he finished, the room was silent for a moment before the applause began. James sat there, his heart pounding, not because he was nervous about what others thought, but because he had done it. He had faced his fears and come out on the other side. He had proved to himself that he could overcome the obstacles that once seemed impossible. As he stood up from the piano and walked off the stage, Olivia was waiting for him. She had been in the audience, watching him closely the entire time. Her smile was wide and genuine as she approached him. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "I knew you could." James smiled back, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "I didn't think I could. But I did," Olivia nodded. "And that's what matters. You didn't give up, even when it was hard. That's the real victory." In that moment, James realized that the performance wasn't the end of his journey. It was just another step. The challenge of the piano had taught him so much about himself, about what he was capable of when he didn't give up. He wasn't the same person he was when he first took on the challenge. He had grown not just as a pianist, but as a person. And as he looked at Olivia, he felt something shift between them. The challenge had brought them closer, but it had also opened a new chapter in their relationship. Whatever came next, James knew one thing for sure. He was ready for it. The days after the concert felt like a whirlwind. James had spent so many weeks focusing on his piano playing, practicing endlessly, and pushing himself to reach a level he never thought he could. But now that the performance was over, there was a strange sense of calm. He had done it. He had faced the challenge and come out on top. It wasn't about being perfect anymore. It was about proving to himself that he could achieve something he once thought was impossible. But even though the concert had been a big milestone, something still lingered in the back of James's mind. He kept thinking about Olivia's words, about her challenge. She had said, "If you can play for me, I'll marry you." It was a playful remark at first, something she had said with a laugh. But now, after everything they had been through together, the lessons, the practice, the performances, James began to wonder if there was more to those words than just a joke. As much as he had enjoyed their time together, there was a part of him that hadn't truly understood Olivia's deeper feelings. She had been supportive throughout the entire process, encouraging him even when things seemed hopeless. But did she really mean what she had said? Was she serious about the challenge? James didn't know for sure, but he couldn't help but think that the moment had come. The piano had been a journey for him, a path of self-discovery. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to find out where it would lead with Olivia. A few days after the concert, James decided to ask Olivia out to dinner. He had been hesitant at first, unsure of what to say, but he realized it was the only way to find out what was really going on between them. It wasn't just about playing the piano anymore. It was about understanding each other, seeing where their connection could take them. They met at a cozy restaurant in the heart of town, a quiet little place where they could talk without distractions. Olivia looked as radiant as ever, her eyes bright and full of warmth. James felt a nervous flutter in his chest, but he also felt a strange sense of excitement. This wasn't just any dinner. This was a moment to finally face the question that had been on his mind for weeks. Over the meal, they talked about everything: the concert, the lessons, and the progress James had made. Olivia smiled proudly as he shared how far he had come, her eyes lighting up with genuine admiration. But as the conversation slowed down, James knew it was time to bring up the question that had been lingering in his heart. "Olivia," began, his voice a little shaky. "About that challenge you gave me, the piano one. You said if I played for you, you'd marry me? I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I just wanted to know, did you mean it?" Olivia didn't immediately respond. She looked at him for a moment, as if considering his question carefully. For a second, James felt his heart skip a beat. Had he made a mistake by bringing it up? Maybe she had just been teasing him all along, but then Olivia smiled. It was soft and gentle, but there was something in her eyes that made James' heart race. "Yes," she said quietly. "I meant it." James stared at her, not sure what to say. He had imagined this moment 100 times, but now that it was here, he was speechless. Olivia reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "I know it sounds crazy," she continued, her voice steady, "but I never really expected you to take it seriously. I never thought you'd actually go through with it. But seeing you put in the effort, watching you work so hard for something you truly wanted, that's what made me realize how much you've changed." James felt his heart swell in his chest. This was more than he had ever hoped for. The challenge, the piano, everything it had been about so much more than just the music. It had been about showing each other their true selves. It's about growing together. "I didn't think I could do it," James admitted, his voice soft. "I thought it was impossible at first. But somewhere along the way, I realized it wasn't just about impressing you. It was about proving to myself that I could face a challenge and push through it. I've learned so much, not just about the piano, but about who I am and what I'm capable of." Olivia squeezed his hand, her smile growing. "That's what I saw in you all along. I knew you had it in you, even when you didn't believe it. And that's why I said what I did. It wasn't just a challenge. It was a test of your heart, your commitment. And you passed with flying colors." James could hardly believe it. All the hours he had spent practicing, all the frustration and doubt, it had led to this moment. And now, it wasn't just about playing the piano. It was about a connection that had deepened, something real and meaningful. But Olivia continued, her voice teasing now, "I do have one more condition." James raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this was going. "What's that?" Olivia smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I want you to keep playing. Don't stop here. I want you to keep growing, to keep challenging yourself. Not just for me, but for you. Promise me you'll never stop playing, no matter what happens." James laughed softly, the tension lifting from his shoulders. "I promise," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I'll never stop." As they sat there, hands clasped together, a quiet sense of happiness settled over them. It wasn't just about the piano anymore. It was about the journey they had shared, the way they had supported each other through the ups and downs. James realized that he had found something far more valuable than just a challenge to win. He had found a connection with someone who truly understood him, someone who had seen his growth and loved him for it. The evening ended with them walking outside into the cool night air, their hearts light and full of promise. James knew that life wasn't going to be easy, but he was ready for whatever came next. He had learned how to face challenges, how to push through fear and doubt. And he had learned that sometimes the greatest rewards come when you least expect them. And as he looked at Olivia, he realized that he had found something even more beautiful than the music he had learned to play. He had found love not just through the notes on the piano, but through everything they had shared, the laughter, the support, and the trust they had built. Together, they stepped into the future, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together,